For so long, the story of the 21st century has really been, well, it's been about this unstoppable march, right? Global urbanization. But today, we're diving deep into something that suggests that whole trend, at least in its biggest form, is, well, it's hitting reverse. We are talking about China and this stunning reversal of its internal migration system. We've got source material here, MGF-21, and some supporting analysis, and it's suggesting that the massive population flow that really powered China's rise is now structurally heading backward. We're talking about a movement that involves close to 300 million migrant workers. These were the absolute engine of the country's growth for decades. So the mission for this deep dive is to try and cut through all the political noise, the headlines, and really understand this through the lens of structure and velocity. The courses are calling this the Urbanization Operating System Reversal. Okay, let's unpack this.
It's a huge moment because this isn't just, a cyclical downturn or some temporary blip. What we're actually seeing here is a physical expression of a very deep structural rupture. That 300 million figure, that gives it the scale, but the real story is the timing and the mechanics of how they're leaving.
Exactly. The core facts are pretty simple when you lay them out. Who is moving? Those 300 million workers, what are they doing? Moving from the big urban centers back to their rural hometowns. But the key part, the thing that stands out, is the when. Our sources are confirming that as of late 2025, people are going home months earlier than they normally would, way before something like the Lunar New Year. So I guess that brings us to the most immediate question, the one everyone's probably thinking. Why are they going home so early this year? If the city is where all the opportunity is supposed to be, why leave before the season is even over?
Well, the short answer is that the city no longer provides what it's supposed to. The transaction has failed. That economic magnet is it's off. But to really get the weight of that decision and what it signals, we need to look at it in layers. The first, and maybe the easiest one to grasp, is what the analysis calls the narrative layer, the N layer. For 40 years, that narrative was the ultimate sales pitch, wasn't it? Move to the city, work hard, endure hardship, and you get upward mobility for your kids, more money, a better life. That belief system, that foundational promise, it's broken.
So you're saying the social contract is it's been revoked?
Precisely. The new story, the one spreading now, is about decline, wage theft, costs that are just out of control, and pure survival. When the cost of just being in the city is higher than the money you're making, which might be zero or even negative, the only logical move is to pack up and retreat. And this brings us to a concept called the gradient. We need to separate the observable fact, the mass movement of people, from the noise around it. That growing feeling of resignation, the apathy you see. It's not just an emotion, it's a measurable signal of immense built-up pressure. Think of the gradient as the gap between what a worker expected to earn and the actual unpaid wages they've gotten over, say, the last 3 to 6 months. When that gap gets too wide, the whole system just tips over.
Okay, that makes it so much clearer. It's not just about feelings. It's a systematic measure of failed promises turning into a structural retreat. But a retreat from what, exactly? I mean, what failed in the core machine that was supposed to keep everything running?
Now we're getting to the OS, the operational system failure. The entire urban pull system, the mechanism that magnetically pulled this huge labor force to the cities, it has basically stopped working. And what's really significant is that the 3 core parts of that system have all contracted at the same time.
At the same time.
That sounds catastrophic. Can you break down those 3 OS layers for us? Of course. They're really the 3 legs that the whole Chinese economic miracle was standing on. First, you have the foreign capital OS. Global supply chains are shifting, there are geopolitical tensions, costs inside China are rising, so major foreign companies are pulling their manufacturing out, moving to Vietnam, to Mexico. When that German electronics factory closes down, the jobs for migrant workers, they just vanish instantly. Second is the export OS itself. Even for the Chinese companies, that massive hunger for goods from Western consumers, the thing that drove all that expansion, it's shrinking. Fewer orders means less need for factories, and that means immediate layoffs. And third, the big one, the real estate OS. This was probably the single largest employer of migrant labor, construction, all the related services. With the developer crisis, the move away from big infrastructure projects, the demand for that kind of labor has just evaporated. They're building ghost cities, but no one is paying the workers.
Wow. So a triple layer collapse, no foreign jobs, shrinking exports, and a frozen construction market. If the economic pull is just gone, the powerful actors must be scrambling. What's happening at the interest layer, the I layer, when everyone's goals suddenly diverge like that?
The conflict there is really profound because the core interests of the 3 main groups are now completely at odds with each other. They're incompatible. The central government, their top priority is stability. Security. They want a slow, managed retreat, maybe over a decade. The last thing they want is 300 million unemployed people suddenly stuck in the cities. But then you have the local governments. They're often broke and they prioritize cost avoidance. They are terrified of a mass return of workers because those people are an immediate unfunded burden. They need services, healthcare. The local governments want that problem to stay somewhere else.
And the migrant worker in the middle of all this.
Their priority is just immediate survival. They're not thinking about upward mobility anymore. They need a place to sleep, food. When the cities can't provide that, they fall back to their last safety net, the land and the social ties that come with their rural hukou. The real conflict kicks in when those local governments actively try to block that survival mechanism.
That brings us perfectly to the next idea, which is where this analysis gets really interesting. Let's talk about the speed mismatch, the shear. This isn't just about things going wrong. It's about different parts of the system breaking down at totally different speeds. It sounds like a high-speed train hitting a brick wall.
That's a great analogy. Shear is exactly that, a velocity conflict. The collapse of the urban OS is happening at a day-to-week speed. Companies go bankrupt fast. Wages stop getting paid immediately. The decision to leave, that's made in days. That's the fast layer. But the system that's supposed to absorb that shock, the rural system, it operates on a completely different timeline. The structure of a rural community, the bureaucracy, the hukou system, rural infrastructure, these things change on a 10 to 20-year timescale.
So when 300 million people moving at days-to-week speed slam into a structure that operates at decade speed, where does that collision actually happen? I mean, are we really seeing villages and towns trying to refuse entry to their own people?
That friction is creating what the sources call local ruptures. They're very specific and very visible. The low-speed administrative system just can't handle the high-speed reversal, so local officials are forced into these desperate, sometimes illegal actions. We're seeing examples of local governments putting up these impossible bureaucratic hurdles, demanding proof of long-term city employment, which of course the returnee can't provide, or like you mentioned, these very specific policies like single-person return prohibited, which is just a way to slow down the flow by making it logistically impossible for people to come back.
That sounds like a system creating an impossible trap for its own people.
Yeah.
Tell us more about the deeper cause here, this compatibility error. It feels like the whole system was built with conflicting instructions from the start.
It was. The incompatibility is a structural trap, a triple bind. And this is where the hukou system is absolutely central. For anyone who doesn't know, the hukou is the household registration system. It ties your access to all the important social services, healthcare, good schools for your kids, pensions to your place of birth, usually a rural village. You could work in Shanghai for 30 years, but your hukou is still back in your home province. So the compatibility error is this three-way collision. First, you have the urbanization policy, which for decades pulled people away from their hukou location. Second, you have the hukou system itself, which denies them permanent social services in the city, making them dependent on their rural safety net. And third, both of those things crash into the reality of rural capacity, which has absolutely zero ability to provide jobs or advanced services for millions of people who suddenly show up.
So the worker is trapped in what you call a double-bind OS. They have to leave the city to survive, but the rural system they're legally tied to can't actually support them.
Exactly. Their attempt to survive by going home is met by a local government that actively rejects them because the rural capacity is too small and the local budget is zero. This creates a state of, well, structural constraint, where an individual's freedom to move, even just to survive, approaches absolute zero. It's a tragic structural trap.
That's a very powerful and clear way to put it. But if this tragedy is unfolding for 300 million people, why does everything seem so quiet on the surface? The sources talk about a hardening of the social membrane. Is that silence just fear, or is it something else?
That silence is maybe the most important social signal. We analyze it as calcification, a hardening, and we have to separate political fear from this deeper economic resignation. The urban middle class, for example, is mostly silent not just because they're afraid, but because of economic self-preservation. Their own wealth in the stock market, in housing, and their job security are all weakening at the same time. They just don't have the buffer needed to voice dissent or even to worry about the class below them. We read this emotional state as a gradient that's moving towards profound resignation and apathy. The expectation of a recovery is zero. The belief that speaking up will change anything is also zero. So the pressure isn't escaping as anger. It's being held in, accumulating internally, which makes the system feel quiet on top while the pressure builds underneath.
That apathy totally changes the risk profile, doesn't it? If the
Right.
pressure's building internally, shouldn't we expect some huge nationwide blow-up? What do you mean when you say the more plausible outcome is local ruptures instead of a big revolt?
Well, based on a structural reading, that calcification actually prevents the pressure from connecting. It can't become a single, unified national movement. There's a lack of social trust, and everyone is focused on their own survival, so the pressure can't really coalesce across provinces into one big political story. So the most plausible future isn't a single collapse, but scattered local tears. Sudden, unpredictable failures at a local level. Think of small, concentrated events. A city suddenly can't make payroll. A localized bank run freezes up the system. A violent clash over land use in one specific village.
So the risk isn't one massive earthquake, but dozens of smaller, unpredictable microquakes happening all over the place. That's what you'd call an MOI, a motive instability type of risk.
Precisely. The national system is designed to contain pressure, but that containment is leaking at the local level. The local administrative OS is failing to provide basic services, leading to these small, unpredictable breaks in the membrane.
And just stepping back for a second, why does this very structural view of China's internal problems matter to, say, a global investor or a policymaker or even just someone listening to this outside of Asia?
Oh, it matters profoundly because it signals a fundamental change in the global economic model we've known for 40 years. China's urbanization, powered by this massive, cheap, mobile labor force, was the bedrock of global consumption and production. When that engine fails and starts going in reverse, it signals the end of an era. And this breakdown creates huge regional stability risks. It shifts economic and social burdens in unpredictable ways onto local governments and neighboring countries. This isn't just a recession. It is a structural breakdown where the fast-collapsing urban OS is colliding with the slow rural OS, trapping millions of people in a compatibility error. When an urbanization model begins to reverse, the real question is, where does the social membrane crack first? It's one of the key signals for Asia in the coming years.
That's a fascinating perspective. The concepts of structure, velocity, shear, they're really powerful tools for seeing how systems work under pressure. That triple bind you described, urban pull, hukou constraint, and small rural capacity, it really makes you think about how structure can just trap individuals. We'll continue this conversation in the next deep dive. Thank you for joining the deep dive.